Good morning, everyone. I'm Bud Graham, president of TESCO, and I want to welcome all of you to the TESCO-Braun webinar, and thank you for joining us. For over 50 years, TESCO's mission has been to provide quality products and service support for our customers. This event is a first for TESCO, and our goal is to hold additional webinars like this in the future. I'd like to introduce my son, Ross Graham, vice president of TESCO, and Jake Despot, Senior Product Service Support Technician at BraunAbility. These two guys have done a great job putting this webinar together. We hope you and your team members enjoy the webinar and will find this information very useful.
Good morning, all. Many of you may already know TESCO, but for those who don't, we are a national bus and van distributor. Attached, you can see aerial views of our two main locations. We have a very large inventory of over 500 new and used vehicles on ground to choose from. Customer service is always a top priority for us at TESCO. We have trained staff support for parts and service. Some other value-added services we offer at TESCO include graphics and leasing. For more information, please visit our website at TESCOBus.com. We also want to thank our partner, BraunAbility, for over 35 years. They've been a partner of ours, and at this time, I would like to turn the webinar over to Jacob Despot. Thank you, Jake.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's meeting or webinar. Some of the things that we're going to cover today are maintenance. We're going to do some of the driver operations and trainings, and cover safety features in today's class. So one of the first things that I kind of want to touch base on is the actual model lifts that we have out there. Now today in this view we have a Millennium lift, and one of the differences in the Millennium lift is you're going to see that we have a roll stop cylinder on the bottom of the platform. So when we talk about the lifts, all of the lifts that we have are exactly the same. And I'm going to deploy the lift out to kind of give you a nice overview of what this looks like. So you can see when we're talking about the lift, everything is actually going to be pretty much the same. When we look at the lift itself, we've got our base that sits inside of the unit of the vehicle. We have towers on either side of the base that come up and kind of lock all of our arms in. Our parallel arms, vertical channels, and the platform. Pretty much everything is going to be the same for all of these lifts. The only thing that really makes them different is the outer barrier system and how we deploy the lift. And it does change a little bit of the troubleshooting procedures as well. Not much, but we're going to cover that today. So you can see in this lift, this one is actually a Millennium lift. We're using a roll stop cylinder to be able to deploy the outer barrier, so we're driving it open with valves and fluid through the cylinder. And then the other lifts that we do have, they are very much the same as far as troubleshooting and as far as how they go through to operate the outer barrier. So the outer barrier on a Century and a Vista lift, those are mechanical. So instead of just having one little foot on the side for this Millennium lift, on a Century and a Vista, across the whole bottom of the platform, right on the end here, we've got a mechanical barrier that we can actually push up and down, and that releases the platform open and closed mechanically, okay? So it's important to understand the difference between those and how they work. Everything is going to look the same on the lift for the Millennium and the Century. The only thing that looks differently on the Vista lift is the platform. When we actually fold it all the way up, there's a top piece of the platform that folds in half. They're not as popular out there. We don't sell as many of those, but we do have those available. And reason being is that whole view for the top half of the lift is actually open for the windows for any drivers if they want to be able to see outside of their van and what their surroundings are. One of the things that we want to just take a look at while we're talking about these lifts, and it's important to understand how they fail. But the difference in this lift, you can see, is on the outer barrier for Millennium, we're using the cylinder, okay? And you can see now that we've driven the cylinder open, And one of the things that we want to just make people aware of is the difference in failures of these lifts, okay? So on a Millennium lift, if I obstruct the outer barrier, the lift motor will continue to run, okay? So that's the basic, one of the things different on the Millennium than the other two. So you can see that I've obstructed the barrier on this unit and that the pump will continue to run. If I do this on a Century or a Vista lift, because those are the same mechanical barriers, the back end of the lift will try to raise up, and as the platform tries to come up, that bottom piece, the bottom plate will actually separate from the platform, and we will lose hand pivot power. So those are the three families that we have of lifts. And then those are the actual failures and the difference between them of how they will fail as far as the outer barrier systems are concerned. One of the things that we're going to cover today is actually how the lift gets power, okay? So we're going to explain the power of the lift and where the power comes from. So it's important to understand, that the lift is always tied to power and ground from the vehicle. Okay, it's tied directly to the battery, preferably the main battery on the bus or the vehicle. So we get a correct and proper charging every time the vehicle is running. But the other part of that is that's not necessarily the activating power. What we actually activate the lift with is power from the interlock. So if you take a look up on the dash towards the front where the steering column is, you're going to see like a little a box per se underneath the dash, okay? And that's the interlock module, and that's where power and ground and all that's coming in and out of, okay? But on the dash up by the steering wheel, you're actually going to see like a little bar, and it's going to say like P for park, maybe PB for parking brake, maybe a little lightning bolt for power. But that's what that little bar is, and that's called the interlock. So the interlock is designed as kind of like a safety feature. So when we go through and pull up to get somebody out of the vehicle, we have to make sure that we have the engine running. We put the vehicle into park. We go back, we push in the parking brake. And then a lot of times when you go back to the back side of the unit, the vehicle, you're going to see doors that you're going to open up one at a time, and when you get those doors fully open, at the top there's typically a door switch. And when all three of those things are met, we now, out of that little module, that box that's mounted underneath the dash there, we now push 12 volts out of the interlock module to the lift. And that is what we call our vehicle secure signal. And that is actually your activating power to run the lift. So when we talk about possibly having power, I go to my lift, I've got power and ground. We need to understand we always have power and ground. If we don't have power and ground at the lift, there's one of two things that are going to be happening. Maybe we have a bad circuit breaker. It's not as likely, but it does happen. But for the most part, if we don't have power and ground, we're not going to start the vehicle or turn the vehicle over. So understanding that what actually runs the lift for secureness is actually power from the interlock. And if we take a look down here, hopefully I'll get a good shot for you to show you where the interlock plug is. So now that we have power from the interlock, we see that we've got right here, down at the bottom of the pump module, is a 9-pin connector, a little Molex connector, and it's got a gray with a red tracer wire on it. That is where the power from the interlock goes into to allow the lift to run, okay? So once we have power into this 9-pin connector, there's going to be a certain process that's going to happen for the driver to be able to know that they can run the lift, okay? So we now have power into the 9-pin connector. That immediately goes to the on-off switch. We turn the switch on, we populate our lights, and there's 3 lights that we have to be able to run this lift. And this is one of the things the drivers can always check to make sure to know that they can run the lift at that time. But right down below here, next to your on-off switch, and hopefully you can get a good look at it, but there's actually a green LED light. And that LED light means that we're now getting power in from the interlock, okay? And it's going to start to begin using that reference voltage to energize relays so we can run the lift. And once we have power in from the interlock, there's 3 lights that we have to run the lift. The first one being the interlock green LED light. The second one being our platform lights located on top of the vertical channels. And then the last one is our hand pendant. And when all 3 of those lights are met, this is telling me that it's secure, all the safety features are met, and we can now run the lift, okay? There's safety options that we want to check. If I come up and I'm one of the drivers, it's important to understand the safety features of the lift and how they affect the lift and what they're going to do, so I know exactly if they're working properly or not. So I'm going to unfold the lift, and we're just going to cover those options right now. I'm going to go ahead and run the lift all the way down to the ground. We'll get a good idea of what we're working with here. Now remember, the lift that we actually have right now is a Millennium lift, and it's driven by a roll-stop cylinder, okay? So one of the safety features that we're going to start with first is the outer barrier. Now, just a few minutes ago, we talked about on a Millennium lift how it affects the outer barrier system if we obstruct it, okay? So it's important to understand this is one of the safety features, our outer barrier. We are actually looking for any disruption in the outer barrier, okay? And what happens is if we don't make our outer barrier raised switch on this particular lift for Millennium, the lift should not run, it should not move, and that's what we're looking for, okay? So on a Millennium lift, we hit the up button. Sorry about that, I don't have my foot, I don't have enough on it here, okay? Right now, that lift is not going to move. The motor is just going to continue to run, okay? And it doesn't take a lot of pressure to be able to hold this thing off. We're going to continue to run the lift until we let off, and then we can close the outer barrier, okay? The next thing is going to be our inboard barrier. So as we run the lift, hopefully I get a good enough spot on it that I can separate it. As I hit the up button, the inner barrier is one of the things that we also are sensing. So if I hit the up button, and I can see if anybody obstructs the inboard barrier, I lose power to my hand pendant. So a good scenario for that would be is if I had a wheelchair on here or a power chair of some sort, and they may have bumped back against the inboard barrier. And once this inboard barrier is up and locked at a 90-degree, we're actually using that switch to provide our hand pendant power. So if they back up and separate the inner barrier from the micro switch that's in there, or the little momentary switch that's in there, we lose our hand pendant power, and that's one of the safety features as well. The other would be our threshold plate. So if we're running the lift, and let's say I'm running the up or the down button, but in this instance we're running up, I'm going to use and check my threshold plate to make sure that the alarm works. It's important to understand on the threshold, if somebody rolls up or stands on the unit when the platform is 1 inch below vehicle floor level, we should set off an alarm and also a red strobe light, okay? But one of the things that's important to understand and communicate to technicians, but also the drivers, is this threshold alarm, when it sets off the strobe and the light, the lift will continue to run. So it meets the specs and guidelines with what we're trying to occupy and sense. So don't be alarmed. It just means that we need to pay better attention to what's going on the platform while we're running the lift. So we can see right now, that lift is going to run while there is somebody on the threshold plate. So we need to understand how that operation works. It does supposed to work with someone occupied on it. We just need to visually check back and see what's going on. That way we're not trying to troubleshoot something that's not really there. The last thing that we're going to cover is also a safety feature, and this is actually a very big thing to check. They're all big things to check, but this is one that could really hurt someone if we don't have it checked, and that's actually our folding pressure. If we have a misadjustment on one of our tower switches, which specifically tower number 4 controls our full pressure, and when I say full pressure, it's like I ate too much food, my stomach is full. Tower number 4 on a Century lift and a Vista lift allows us to build full pressure to lift someone up off the ground. On a Millennium lift, like this one, we're using the outer barrier raise switch, which is part of the safety feature that has to be made, and also tower number 4. Those two switches have to be made on this lift in particular to build enough pressure to come up off of the ground, okay? So it's important to understand that. But when we get to vehicle floor level, we want that tower number 4 to actually turn off. And there's actually a way that we check it. And we just use our hand, doesn't take much pressure at all, and we hit the fold button. And we should hear the lift go into like a little bit higher mode, like it's bypassing. And you can hear that the motor sounds a little bit different and like the pump is maybe stalling out. That's a good thing. At this position, we don't want to build full pressure to actually tip somebody back in. So to understand how that process works for building full pressure, I'm going to walk you through it right now. So for timing purposes, we're going to act like we're down all the way on the ground. On this lift, we said we needed the outer barrier switch, which we've got made, and also our tower number 4 switch, which is now made. And both of those switches on this Millennium lift allow us to build full pressure. So from the ground all the way up to vehicle floor level, we are actually using that to be able to build pressure. So from the ground all the way up to this point, I'm going to hit the up button. And at this time, we want tower number 4 to shut off, okay? We're not using tower number 4. We're still using our outer barrier raise switch, okay? But once we lose the tower number 4 switch, we don't build full pressure, and it's important to understand that. Okay, we're going into bypass at that point, and you can hear it in the pump. But it's important to understand why we use tower number 4 to build pressure, because at this time, we're just using the pump itself to be able to build pressure internally, which is a lower setting. But tower number 4 is actually going to come back on when we're at a 45-degree angle to be able to stow the lift under full pressure. And I'll show you that right now. If you watch as I keep my hand on the lift, you'll hear the motor stall out, and then you'll hear it pick up where the motor goes back to like a stronger sound and you can hear it. That's when tower number 4 actually picks back in. So you can actually see that it's moving the lift on me when we do this, which that's a lot of pressure, okay? So that's why we check those things. You could be in a power chair, you could be in a manual chair, you could do many things. If that's adjusted wrong, it'll flip us in. Tower number 4 comes back in at a 45-degree angle, so we actually stow the lift properly under full pressure. We're going to cover that again here in a little bit and come back to that, but just for anybody that may have a question or a thought in their mind at this time, that's why it's coming back on. We're using it for stow procedures. We'll cover that here in just a little bit of why. Okay, so at this time, we're just going to go through basically a big run through of what we just did as a pre-trip inspection, as if I were a driver going out, getting ready to go on the run and making sure that everything is good and in working condition before I go out on a route. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is make sure, I'm going to start my vehicle, make sure things are running. I'm going to get my interlock, which is the secure signal to the lift, which activates the lift. I'm going to push in my parking brake, make sure the vehicle is in park. I'm going to open up my doors, and as I open up my doors, the door switch at the top is made, and my on switch is in the on position. All of that is good at this point. I can see now that we've been through this, I've got 3 lights, interlocked LED light, my platform light, and my hand pendant light. So at this time, I'm good to be able to go through with the rest of my pre-trip inspection. And one of the things that we're going to look at in the inspection is just basic things, okay? We're going to look for anything that may be loose, okay? If the handrails are loose, maybe if there's anything on the platform, we're just doing just a quick overview visual. If we see any kind of fluid or any wires that may be hanging out, we're just looking for obvious things. Now that we've gotten past that point, what we're going to do is we're going to run the lift out. And as the lift runs out, you can see that this platform is going to unfold. And as a driver, for me to be able to look for anything to relay to my technician, I'm going to look for anything that looks like bouncing or pulsating on the platform, where it's kind of like coming out. And it almost kind of looks, I don't know if I can depict it here, but it almost kind of looks like this. Maybe it might start and stop, and it kind of bounces a little bit, and it'll pick up and then stop. We're looking for actual smooth operation all the way down. So realistically, if everything is going correctly, what we just saw was not correct. We're just looking for it to come out nice and smooth. If we happen to see where it's bouncing out of any kind, we need to report that to our technicians, okay, or maintenance. We want to be able to give them a heads up ahead of time that there is an issue, and it may keep us from taking that lift out onto a route. Could be we may have a bad harness that's cutting power. Sometimes that can kind of cause pulsating of the platform. We could also have maybe gas springs. There's actually large gas springs right behind these vertical channels and right below these handrails that actually help kind of keep pressure and direct outward pressure on the lift to be able to make that smooth operation. And if one of those gas springs have by chance blown, or they're starting to leak, or they're getting weak, it'll cause a kind of a bouncing, pulsating feature, okay? So that's kind of what we're looking for. As we go through the rest of the operation, we're checking to make sure that our safety features are working, okay? That's part of the pre-trip inspection. So if I go through and I put my foot on the barrier at this point, and I go down, I can see my lift isn't going to run, okay? That's good, that's working. My hand pendant light is now not lit. So we've come off one of the safety switches. I let off, we come back in contact with our occupied switch, I can run it down. So I know that that is working. One of the other things that we want to check, our threshold alarm. Remember, like we said, 1 inch below floor level. It's not going off now because we are at floor level. But at 1 inch, it should begin to start picking up right where we left off. So we know that that feature is working. And then also on the way down, we're looking to make sure that our handrails are nice and snug. We don't have a lot of play or slop in them. And we're looking for smooth operation all the way down to the ground. So here we are, we're getting out to the barrier point. Now everything's opening up. And then we can check our outboard barrier. It's working correctly. The motor runs because we have a Millennium lift, okay? A Century lift, it kills the hand pendant power like we talked about earlier. Same on a Vista, okay? So coming back up, same thing, smooth operation. We're just gonna watch it. Last thing that we're going to check before we get to this point, fold pressure, okay? We need to make sure our fold pressure works just the way we want it. So I'm going to lock these wheels in just so it doesn't try to move the lift on me again. But one of the ways that we can check as a driver to make sure that we don't fold anybody in and we don't fold anybody in at the wrong time is just like this, okay? This is exactly how I would teach you in person if we were at the bus right now. We would check it right there at vehicle floor level, and then we would inch it all the way up so we know it doesn't come back on until 45. Some people may not be tall enough to do that, but this is just kind of a secondary way to ensure that. And then we can see, yeah, we can hear the motor rise up under full pressure, and now it's taking back into the stow position. Once we get to that point, we go back, we stow the lift, we make sure that everything's taut, and we're good to go. As we go through and do these pre-trip inspections, I usually tell everybody, each time you go out for the day, do this first thing, okay? Don't let something, if you see something that may be going on that's not normal and outside of what we just checked, because we should always check our safety procedures and make sure that those things are in line with the way they should work. But there may be other things that crop up, like some of the bouncing. If there is gas springs, we may see fluid leaking somewhere. These are things that we need to report to maintenance staff or a dealer, whomever, to be able to get this thing fixed and corrected without just running the lift until it just doesn't work anymore, okay? So the better off we can be preventative, the lift is going to be in better shape in the long run. Okay, so that was the pre-trip inspection. It literally takes about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes tops, okay? You start your day and now you're off and running. So one of the things that I want to talk about is actually kind of driver operation and driver expectations, okay? So as a driver, say if I were the driver of a unit, one of the things that I'm going to take a look at is how I'm standing, how I'm loading people, and as I'm going through this procedure, the things that I want to kind of be aware of. Now, one of the first things we go through, I've done my pre-trip inspection, I paid attention in the training I was a part of, and everything matches up. I'm ready to run my lift. One of the things that I always tell people not to do is when you go out to run the lift, first thing is take your hand pendant and stand on the opposite side of where your pump is at. Because when you run the lift, and a lot of people don't understand, that lift platform is coming right down on top of your cord, okay? And even though you may have a reason that you do that, the best way to not damage the hand pendant cord is just stay on the same side of the pump that you're on, okay? The second thing is we want to make sure that we're clear of the platform. So this is one of the common things that I see when I go out on the road, if I do training, if I do repairs, even just observations. Not very long ago, I was out on the West Coast and I saw a guy that was actually running the lift and went to unfold it, opened his doors up and started talking to someone as he was trying to run the lift and unfolding it, and didn't pay attention and actually got to this point. Now, it didn't hit him, but he wasn't paying attention and it came close enough that he had to get back out of the way, okay? So as the driver, we want to be able to protect the people that we're giving a ride to and helping, but at the same time, we need to pay attention to give ourselves the opportunity to keep ourselves safe, okay? So as we run the lift, I'm a driver. I'm going to grab my hand pendant. I'm going to stay on the same side as the platform and not stretch it all the way across. And one of the things that I want to do is get my person that I've got ready in the vehicle. And as I come outside, I want to be able to look back at the lift. And I'm going to unload the lift or unfold it. Now I'm at vehicle floor level, okay? And if you notice, one of the things that I'm doing is actually kind of looking back into the bus, and I'm actually seeing the platform come out, okay? One of the most common things that I see as well on a part of a driver, and most accidents that occur that come in to us when they happen, is lack of paying attention, okay? Something has happened where somebody didn't necessarily pay attention or see what was going on, and we could have had it prevented, okay? So one of the things we want to do is not come out and start talking like this while I'm running the lift, okay? And I'm asking so-and-so, you know, hey, how'd the ball game go last night? And I have no idea what's going on behind me. That's a very common thing. So we want to make sure that we're engaged back in the lift and know what's going on. So at this time, I've got my lift at vehicle floor level. I'm going to put my hand pendant here. I don't have a vehicle per se, so we're going to act like I went inside the bus and got my tenant on the platform. what we try to do, and each vehicle is a little bit different, okay? Some of the vehicles, if it's in a bus, there's a lot more room. There's room to work with where we can have multiple riders, and we try as a goal to get everyone facing outward. That's what we recommend as Braun, is to have your clientele facing outward, grabbing on to the handrails, okay? That allows us to be able to keep eye contact with the rider throughout the whole ride, and allows us to kind of keep also an eye on what's going on inside the bus. Some vehicles that are out there internally inside the vehicle, they don't have as much room. So say if we've got 2 or 3 wheelchairs stacked up in there, they only have a certain way to be able to go in and out. There may be the opportunity, or not the opportunity, it may just be because of that reason that you would have to load somebody in backwards, okay? So at that time, you would load them in backwards and have them grab onto the handrails. The same exact thing, we're gonna grab onto the handrails, okay? So what we do recommend though, if at all possible, is to have them facing outward. Now, in this instance, I'm in a bus, I've got enough room, I've got my clientele facing out, grabbing the handrails. If you have a handrail belt, you can go ahead and lock it and buckle it in. It's not something that is mandatory on every lift, so that is an option, okay? So if you're looking at a lift and you go, I don't have a handrail belt, that's because you would have to specially order that, okay? They don't come standard. As a driver, we're gonna go through both scenarios. If I have my person loaded up and I have a nice big bus and I've got plenty of room, I've got them facing out, one of the most important things that I wanna do is keep eye contact with my rider, okay? And the reason being is because now, not only can I see exactly what's going on with that rider, but I can see what's going back on inside of the bus, okay? So I've got them all loaded up. The last thing I'm gonna do before I actually take off and finish the process of going down is that we're gonna power off the power chair, or if it's a manual chair, we're going to lock in the brakes, okay? And that way everybody's nice and secure. They can hang on to the handrails. I always recommend going back and keeping eye contact with that rider, because as we're going downward, we can see it's not terribly far, but there are some times where it is in a bus setting higher up. And so it is a little bit of an uneasy feeling for a rider to be able to be suspended in the air and in a wheelchair. And sometimes, depending on vehicle rate or suspension, it may even be feeling like they're going a little downward. So it kind of gives that person, that rider, a little sense of comfort to keep eye contact with them. And if you want to talk and engage in conversation, remember, we don't want to talk about the Pacers game or whoever's playing the Thunder game. We're actually going to talk to the rider and engage with them, and it kind of comforts them. The other reason that we do that is because if something goes wrong while they're riding, a lot of times you can actually pick up things that are going to go wrong by feel. And a lot of times a facial expression from the rider can tell you if something is going to go wrong, or maybe if they feel something that doesn't feel right, it's not normal. Maybe they've ridden several times before. It's easy. All we have to do is let off, and we can stop and ask them if everything's okay, everything feels fine, and we can kind of be preventative at that point. We're keeping eye contact with the rider, but we're also keeping eye contact inside the bus. And like we said earlier, remember when we talked about one of the safety features is the threshold plate. We set off the alarm, we set off the red strobe light, okay? It does not stop the lift if it's occupied. So one of the things that happens if we get that alarm going off while it's running down, we know something is going on probably before the threshold of alarm and light even have a chance to come on, because we can see right in the doorway. We can keep visualization with what's going on, so we can kind of stop, and if need be, we can prevent anything from happening. One other thing that I meant to kind of tell everyone is recommendation. This is what we say is Braun. Everybody has their own way, but the way we recommend is that the tenant does not ride on the platform with the user. And that's a safety basically a safety deal is why we do that, okay? You can see if we get weight on the platform is actually kind of free floating. We're just using gravity, okay? So these things aren't locked in place. So if I stood on one side of the platform, I could actually shift that platform all the way over. And if I don't have my weight pretty centered in there, or maybe I've got a user that for whatever reason, they've got a rather large chair to begin with, and I kind of have to move them a little bit sideways to make them fit. The last thing I want to do as a rider is put more sideways weight on it, because we could come off of one of our safety switches, and it's definitely going to affect how long the lift is going to last, okay? If we start putting it on a side load and standing off side to side, it puts a wear on those pivot pins to where things aren't going to last as long. It's meant to have the weight distributed within the center of the platform to be able to hold onto the handrails, okay? So we're going to finish what we're doing. I've got my rider. We're going to come down to the ground. And this gives us the opportunity now to either unlock the handrail belt and then re-engage or disengage the brakes, or flip power back on and get our rider back in. And basically, we just repeat the operation from what we just did. So if we have limited space inside, like we said, it may require that you have to load people in facing the bus, okay? We just want to make sure that they're hanging onto the handrails, and that we know it's recommended that we have them facing outward, but it may have instances where that's not possible, okay? Now, we're gonna flip it around, and let's say the last tenant we had was facing outward, and this is what we did. We went through and we were keeping eye contact, everything was good. Here's the next one. I got somebody else that's coming on, I've just picked up, and maybe for whatever reason I have to load them in facing the bus. Let's cover that. I'm coming back, I get them loaded in, I try to keep them centered in the platform, they grab the handrails, and now we're set to go, okay? We lock in the brakes, power down the power chair if we need to, and then from this point, we want to make sure that we try to keep eye contact with them the best we can, okay? So they're already facing in, I don't have to be stretched all the way back to be able to see everything that's going on. I can actually stand right here. If they're facing inward, I can be right along with them and still see what's going on, engage in conversation, and actually I'm just even closer to what's going on inside the bus if something were to happen. I'm actually just a little bit closer to everything. So I'm going to run the lift. And then at this point, same thing. We're gonna get them back inside the unit, back into the bus, and if you have tie downs, whatever it may be that's inside the unit, you go through that process. That's pretty much the driver operation as far as unloading and loading passengers, okay? One of the things that I want to kind of talk about as well within the driver expectations is how to stow the lift properly, okay? That's a big thing, because I don't know, when I go out on the road to do trainings, if I'm doing field repairs, maybe just installations at the OEM level, okay? I come by and one of the biggest complaints is, man, my lift's rattling like crazy. It makes a lot of noise. If I get going down the road, maybe it doesn't at first, and then I get out on the route and 20, 30 minutes, it's rattling around. Well, remember when we reverted back earlier and we talked about building full pressure for the lift? 99% of what I run into in the field when there's noise problems and they say that there's drifting, it's usually because of not stowing the lift properly. Now, you got to remember, we produce 23,000 lifts a year, okay? So we're pumping these things out. Yes, there could be the possibility of cylinder bypass or maybe a pump, but majority overall, it's operation, okay? So when we go through as a driver, we went through the checking the procedure to make sure that tower number 4 was not engaging until we were at a 45 degree. We heard the pump kick back on, okay? Now, we'll run the lift up. And at this point, tower number 4, actually probably about right there. We're pretty much at a 45. Tower number 4 is kicking back on, okay? And the reason being is because we need that full pressure. It's 2,500 PSI that we're pulling this lift in to be able to stow the lift and keep it locked. So I don't know how well we can see this at this time, or if you have the zoom feature, but if you take a look when you go back out to your lifts, in here you can see on the inside of the parallel arms, there's stow blocks, and what we call those in the service manuals are the quiet ride features. And you can see the side plates of the platform as they come up. They will actually, the side plates of the platform, it just kind of comes up. And let's just say this is my platform for visual purposes, okay? I'm coming up, and my platform is going to stow right into the center of that block, okay? And that's what those are meant for. But a lot of times, I'm going to show you right here what it looks like. A lot of times what happens is here's my platform and I'm hitting full, and then I get all the way up to here. And you remember what we talked about earlier is when we stop the folding to make sure nobody's going to get actually folded into the vehicle, and that pump kind of went to like a higher noise level, like it was bypassing. Well, it's going to kind of make a similar noise when we build full pressure and get into these blocks. That's a good thing. So we need to make sure that what I see a lot of is prematurely, and I'm going to show you, but that my platform right here comes up, and right as I get to this block, everybody lets off. We don't even give the pump the opportunity to go into that higher pitch mode, and now we're not even stowed under full pressure. We are not going to hurt the lift at all if we go hit those blocks and then hold the fold button. That's very important in the process of not having any drifting, okay? So let's go through it. Okay, that's pretty much what happens most of the time when I go out in the field. Let's just say maybe it was locked in a little further, but if I take a look right now, my side plates of my platform are actually in the blocks, okay? But there's a bottom process, and I don't know how well we'll be able to see it on the camera, but if you take a look at the bottom end of this platform, there's a secondary process. When that fold comes up and gets into this block, the bottom of that platform is actually going to come and rise up and in, and it's going to lock under full pressure. We're going to be stowed under that 2,500 PSI. Without that, we're going to end up with this going down the road. You can see my handrails aren't even tight. Things are bouncing around. And those are a lot of times, if you happen to be in maintenance as well and you're complaining, you've got a driver that's complaining of drifting or something of that nature, what happens is we end up misadjusting handrails a lot of the times because they think these dang handrails are making a lot of noise. I'm going to crank them down as much as I can to keep them against that bumper. And now we've just created another problem, and we've adjusted them in the wrong fashion, okay? So if we take a look, normally what we're going to recommend is that when we fold the lift, we hold the fold button, and then we usually say 2 to 3 seconds after you've got it folded and in the blocks, hold down the fold button, okay? So here we go. Let's see if we can watch the rest of this bottom half of the platform kind of pick up and in, okay? Okay, if we all heard that, that's a good thing. We can sit and do that for 30 seconds. That doesn't hurt the lift at all. We're building full pressure. Okay, now, let's revisit maybe something that was brought up. Well, I've got a lot of noise problems. I've got a lot of drifting issues, okay? Let's take a look now. This thing is locked in. Now, the stand is moving, but the lift itself, we're not moving anything. It's going to be quiet. We're going to go down the road. And now that it's locked in at 2,500 PSI, we're going to be able to go quite some time, even on rough surface, before we show any signs of loss of hydraulic pressure, okay? So if you're a mechanic or maintenance guy that's watching this video, one of the important things before if somebody's complaining of that type of noise or drifting, this is way easier to check and stow that thing for 3 seconds after the fact, and then let it sit there. You can clock out, go clock in on another job, and still be testing this thing out for 4, 8 hours, however long you can keep it in the shop for to see if there's any hydraulic loss, okay? All right. The handrail adjustments, we just covered that, but we want to make sure when we do that we stow the lift all the way up and in, and then right below the handrails, you can see the handrail right here, right below each side of the handrail, there is a large Allen set screw that's in there, and we want to make sure when we go through that the lift is completely stowed under full pressure, just like what we talked about, holding it for 2 to 3 seconds, and then we're just going to snug the handrail clockwise with the set screw until it just touches the barrier, or the bumper, I'm sorry, and then we snug it one more time. We don't want to over tighten them. So the bumpers that are on here, if we go through and over tighten them, that ends up looking like a taco when it's all done. And now we've created a problem with the top end of the lift, where now we've got so much direct force on the top of these vertical channels, we may not have the same stow procedure or the same unfold procedure where we're actually able to release the unit, and it causes a bind, okay? So that's one thing, pretty easy adjustment to be able to go through. One of the things we're going to talk about, kind of getting near towards the end here, when we talk about, as a driver, expectations of relaying information. A lot of times I'll come across people that have intermittent problems, okay? And one of the biggest things with intermittent problems is not being able to relay the information to the technician to be able to have them have an idea of possibly what's going on, okay? It's hard to track those. So if you've run onto this before, or even if you have a consistent problem, one of the things that we need to be able to relay is, A, we went through our pre-trip inspection. We know if the lift's bouncing around, we see fluid. Those are obvious things that we're going to go through and report. But as a driver, the other thing, we may be out on a route, okay? And if we go through and think about what we needed to run the lift, once the lift has power, the biggest thing that I can tell you to relay is your lights, okay? We had our interlock LED light, which is down here by the pump. We had our platform lights, and then we had our hand pendant lights. And if we go through and run the lift and the lift stops, I need to immediately look which one of my lights is out. That's going to be a huge help in getting any kind of information for a technician to pick up a possible intermittent harness issue, micro switch being stuck, something of that nature. That's a lot of good information. And it may be the fact that you go through and you're hitting one of the buttons and you don't get any function, but you have all 3 of your lights lit, then that's a totally different deal. And we know that that's a functional problem. We can attack our troubleshooting in a different manner, okay? But as a driver, you have a huge part in being able to aid in troubleshooting out in the field by relaying what you're seeing. One of the things that we're going to kind of cover here is routine maintenance. As far as maintenance is concerned, we kind of tell everybody, every 750 cycles, we're going to go through and take a look at maintaining the lift. And it may require not as many cycles, okay? Let's just be honest. Maybe we don't hit 750 cycles in 7 months, or if you're at a school district, you might not hit that in 3 years, okay? But one of the things that we need to focus on is maintaining the lift. And it's just like anything else, okay? the better you maintain it, the better shape it's going to be in, the easier it is to work on, the longer it's going to last you. 750 cycles may be out there. So what I recommend to you is having it done when you have your vehicle, maybe oil change. Maybe you might have go in for brake service. Have them go through and do a maintenance spec on the lift to keep it up and running, okay? One of the biggest things you're going to find if you look inside of a service manual, an operator's manual, it's going to be in both, but there's going to be a maintenance and lubrication schedule. It's very detailed, and pretty much 95% of what you're going to have is light penetrating oil, and it's going to show you with arrows of everything that you need to lubricate and with what you need to lubricate it with. So there's really only one other spot on the lift, which is our fold arms, that takes a grease, okay? One of the main things that I will tell you is penetrating oil is the biggest thing we want to use. If we come out to the outer barriers, especially on the Centuries and Vistas, and we come out and start using like a white grease, that's not going to be good because we're going to seize up on everything. It's going to create an operational problem for the barriers, okay? They attract sand, grit, dirt, whatever it is. It's going to be inside of where you just greased it. But the one place that we will use a grease is right inside, right behind this vertical channel. We have a fold arm, and it's actually two tubes that are kind of linked together, and they slide back and forth. And there's a little gas spring that's inside of there that allows and kind of pulls the barrier, the inner barrier, right here. This barrier, that's what keeps that barrier locked and taut, okay? And that's part of the process for that. So that area is going to be greased, just so you know. And you'll typically see it if you have a newer unit. You put your hand on it and it's a red style grease, okay? The last thing that we're going to cover as far as the lift is concerned, we're going to go through the backup pump system, okay? So let's stow the lift up. $1,000, $2,000, perfect. Okay, we're stowed up. All right. Turning the lift off. Now, we're going to cover the backup pump system, okay? One of the main things, if you look on the side of the lift, could be on the right-hand side, could be on the left-hand side, depending on what side the pump is mounted on and the style of lift you have. Attached to the pump, you should find a handle. It's the backup pump handle, okay? This is a very important tool because I will tell you that anytime anybody calls me in a panic mode or there's a scenario where something has really gone south, this is not in the bus or not in the vehicle. And so it's kind of taken for granted that it should just be there. But that's one of the other things that I always try to tell people on the pre-trip inspections. Make sure these are in there. They're like 10 or 15 bucks. Normally when I get those kind of calls, we've got the extremes where it's really, really hot and humid outside, or it's really, really bone-chilling cold. And we've got somebody either stuck outside or inside the vehicle. And I've had it to where we've had people stuck in the vehicle on summer days where the AC went out as well. We have no backup pump handle. We don't want that problem. So we've got the handle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the lift around here, and we're going to take a look at the operation of the backup pump. It's pretty simple, but we're going to look at it here, and hopefully I don't lose any view from you. Whoops. Okay. So if we take a look on the end of the backup pump handle, you can see that it's actually got, I don't even know how close I can get here, but we've got little notches on the end of this thing. And this is actually what we're using to be able to release the backup pump, okay? Now, if we look on the back side of the pump, and you can see, this is a really good shot of what the lift looks like from the inside of the vehicle. And remember, we talked earlier about our base plate being on the bus floor. These are the towers connecting everything for the parallel arms, the vertical channels. Connected to the tower is your pump, depending on which side it is. And if you look, when you look at the pump from the side or from the back view by the towers, you can see this little jack sits right here. It's a little bottleneck jack that sits right on top of the pump. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these notches. And right below, there's a wing nut that we use to release the backup pump in an emergency situation. Now, when I say this emergency situation, that's exactly what that means, okay? If we've got someone that we need to get out of the unit or back into the unit, we want to try to finish that run, be done with it. We don't want to just continually not let someone know that there's a problem and use the backup pump, because the backup pump is not used or supported in that kind of fashion for a daily, everyday use, because on the back side of the backup pump, there's actually like a linkage that's on the back, and you'll blow that linkage out, and then you won't have any lift operation if we have nothing electrically. Okay, so it's important to know emergency. So right below, here's the backup pump. Here's the wing nut we're going to open up, and we're just going to go counterclockwise. And we can see, we didn't do it fast enough. I actually simulated a drift there. That's what happens when you do things live. Sometimes they don't go your way. I'm going to open up the backup pump. And I can see, you can see that I open the backup pump and I can close it, okay? We want to be able to open it enough, just like what you saw a minute ago. I didn't open it up fast enough, and it was so slow that it simulated a drift, and it caught on the lift tight latches for if it happens to drift. And I'll show you those when we get done real quick of what those look like. But it'll actually clip onto the rollers, and then we get stuck. We have to repump it back up. So open up the valve enough to get past that point, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of open the valve slowly so the platform has a nice even rate to floor level. And then I'm just going to lock it back, going clockwise to close the backup pump. And now we have the opportunity to wheel somebody in or out, depending on what we've got. Maybe we have to go all the way to the ground. If we go all the way to the ground, same thing. If we have anybody that's on the platform, we got to remember, we want to try to do everything we would normally do as if we were running it with the hand pendant. So now I got to remember, I'm inside the bus. I've pretty much got everything manned here, but now it's very important that as I'm letting this lift out, I am paying really close attention to what's going on this platform, okay? Because now I'm not outside the unit facing back and seeing the whole bus. So I'm just going to kind of inch it down real slow, and I can even just go as slow as I want to make sure nothing happens. And it's when we do this backup operation, it's just like what we did before. You're still going to wheel the person on. They're still going to grab the handrails. You're still going to lock the brakes in or turn the power off. And then we are going to try to keep eye contact with them the best that we can, or have a really good eye sight on that platform, okay? To reverse that operation, we go all the way down to the ground. Let's say we need to come back up. We just close the backup pump valve. We don't need to crank on it. We just need to snug it to where it stops. And then you just put the handle right into the jack. And we just pump it all the way up. And the reason you don't want to do this a lot, because it is 77 pumps from the bottom all the way to the folded position, and that gets really old, okay? So if you have this problem, let your mechanics know. Let your dealer know, okay? Now, for time's sake, I'm done with my backup pump. It makes sense to only put it back where I found it. Right on the other side of the pump into the clips, and I know it's right where it should be. So now I'm going to go ahead and stow the lift. I'm going to power it back up. And I'm going to give you a quick look at what those lift type latches, what those look like, and hopefully I can get you a really good view. But hopefully everybody can see this is actually a no-no, but we're doing this for testing purposes to show you, okay? We don't usually grab the hand pennant and drag it all the way around. But if you take a look on inside of your bus, you can see these latches right here. And these are lift tight latches. Little dampening spring that sits right here. And then there's a roller. And when the lift is completely stowed, this is what it should look like. This lift tight latch should just hover right over the top of the roller. These are not for stow. And a lot of people will actually try to run the lift up and stow it until that little roller is hooked. The only thing that these are used for is the drifting procedure, okay? So if the lift does have a hydraulic leak, cylinders, pump, whatever it may be, slowly over time, or in an instance, if you run onto it before and you didn't realize how you were supposed to stow the lift for holding full 2 to 3 seconds, what happens is we just kind of saw a little drift, and it's kind of hard to do it, but you can see right here that little hook would actually just flip right over that, and it would lock that platform in. And it's kind of a safety feature, so it just doesn't happen to hit the doors, flop around freely. It's locked into that lift tight latch and roller. So we're going to put the lift back. And that's gonna be it for today. If there's anything that has not been covered, if you have a question on anything, whether it's possibly TESCO bus related, whether it's BraunAbility related, we're gonna get you answers. If you have that question, contact your local sales rep, your local TESCO sales rep, and we will make sure to get you an answer. I want to make everyone just thank you for attending today's webinar. We really appreciate you being a loyal customer to BraunAbility, to TESCO, and we appreciate your business. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bud and Ross, and I want to thank you for everything today. So thank you guys, appreciate it. Yep, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right.
I'd like to give a special thanks to Jake and BraunAbility for your support with this webinar. It's very valuable information that I'm sure all of you will find very useful. On behalf of our sales and support team at TESCO, we would like to once again thank all of you for attending the webinar, and also our opportunity to work with you on your bus and van purchases and needs. We truly appreciate your business relationship with all of you, and thank you very much.